Okay, are you ready to start? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, thank you so much for coming. Just want to make sure this mic is on. Can everyone hear me okay? It's a little low. It's a little bit low. Okay. I don't know how to. I'll just speak louder for you guys at the back.
Go back one more.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Theron and I'm the director and curator here at Dunlop Art Gallery. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Whether you're joining us here in person, online via the live stream, or if you're watching the recording later on, we're so pleased that you could join us today to greet Rita McKeough. So before I start, I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. I wish to acknowledge this land on which we gather as Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Saulteaux, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As I mentioned, it's my true pleasure to welcome Rita McKeough to realize this important work in Regina, Feel Through the Deepness to See. So this exhibition is the third iteration of a series including Darkness is as Deep as the Darkness is, which was curated by Jacquelin Bell at the Walter Phillips Gallery in Banff, and Dig as Deep as the Darkness, which was curated by Dylan McHugh for the Richmond Art Gallery in BC. For this conversation, as I mentioned, we also welcome our online audiences, and so there will be an opportunity at the end of the talk to ask questions or share comments. So please just share those comments on the right-hand side of the comment field section of your screen. And before I introduce Rita, I want to thank the many individuals who have contributed to making this work possible. So thank you to the essay writer, Lindsay French, as well as thank you to the small but mighty team, as I like to say, at Dunlop Art Gallery. So our team, John Cody, Jesse Dishaw, Eric Hill, Wendy Peart, Sarah Pittman, Aisha Mosin, Margaret Besai, Tai Sang, Shamim Agamina, and also thank you so much to Rita. So I also want to share that Rita mentioned to me that this is her 40th anniversary since the first time that she did an exhibition here at Dunlop Art Gallery. So I have the catalog Tremor, which is from the exhibition that she did 40 years ago here. So we're so pleased to welcome you back to Treaty 4. Thank you so much for the work that you've put into the exhibition. And I'm going to pass things off now to Thomas, who will introduce Rita.
How's that? Awesome. Yes, thanks everyone, and yeah, it's really great to have Rita here. 40 years after her first exhibition here, but she has been very busy in that interim time. She did manage to be awarded the Governor General Award for Visual and Media Arts. She's been an instructor at many institutions, including NASCAD-U and AU Arts. She has exhibited nationally and internationally, working across and through disciplines in media, including performance, sound installation, and media art. A lot of these works were realized in publications such as Works, which was a retrospective publication by Truck Contemporary Art, M Media, and MST, and edited by Dinah Sherlock. And this current body of work, which you'll see upstairs, which as mentioned was the third chapter in a series of exhibitions, is also going to be featured in an upcoming publication in June. So keep an eye out for that. We'll keep you posted, absolutely. Just a through line through everything that Rita's done, there's a powerful ethic and generosity and belief in community, and I'm really thankful that we're all here to be able to share in that, and that she's been able to contribute to our community. Her work is done with many hands, and I do want to echo again the thank yous that were given to the staff, and in particular to Cody and Jesse, and when you go upstairs you'll see why. And I just want to end and thank Rita for her friendship, and I'm just really thankful that we can bring that into this space. And yeah, it's just been such a joy. Thanks so much, Rita.
Well, again, thank you all very much, and thank you, Alyssa Farron, for your welcome and for the opportunity to show here, and thank you to Thomas for your unwavering support and dedication. And yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and it's true, show here 40 years ago, but I was only 2 when I had that show. So, but anyway, I wanted to thank everybody at the Dunlop. It's true, it's a mighty team, and Thomas, again, thank you so much. And I had 2 amazing workers, helpers, people collaborating with me, which was John Cody and Jesse Deshaw. So thank you both. You worked really hard, long hours. So thank you very much for that. And everybody on the team, that great, mighty team. And I really appreciate it. And thank you to the Regina Public Library. Everybody's been so friendly and welcoming, and it's been really wonderful. And I'm very, very grateful. And so one thing that I've really been grateful of all through my practice is that I don't make this work alone. So many people have helped me, and you can see by my comments that so many people over the years have contributed to the work, and it's really our work. And I'm so grateful and respectful for all of those people. And I like to acknowledge them before I show this work, because I feel like it wouldn't be here without them. I'll probably cry. Yeah, anyway. It always happens when I try to say that, but it's a great community of people that support each other, and very, very grateful. So enough crying, that's enough of that. One thing I wanted to say too is I started out as an artist working in community radio. And one thing I learned, many, many lessons, and I'm still learning so many lessons, but being in bands, I'm a drummer, played in many punk and rock bands over the years, and working in community radio, it really taught me many, many important things, which I'm still learning about, which is the importance of community, about working together. It's also really, it was important too to learn about, speaking up when you needed to speak up, and finding the voices that weren't heard. And in community radio, it's so beautiful that everybody's voice is important, and every voice should be heard. And those were lessons, I think, that really influenced my work, and has for many, many years. And I have some wonderful bandmates and some excellent kind of punk and music experiences. So that's been a really important part of my practice as well. I'm really interested in integrating sound and musicality into the audio components of my work. And I think that comes from those experiences, working collaboratively, and again, working with a kind of a, say what needs to be said, and kind of stand up for what you believe in. So I'm grateful for those lessons that I'm still learning, but I through radio and music, that's been a very, very important part of my practice, I think. So I'm grateful for that. And check out, if you look on my website, some of these bands are really amazing musicians, and really incredible careers. And I really hope that you'll have time to kind of check some of them out. And so I'd like to just start by talking a little bit about some of the early work that I started. So what I've done for today's talk is just select a few works over the years, and try to see a thread that takes me to this new work, and the focus that's on this new work. And so I'm going to show you just kind of a selection that has made me think about that kind of trajectory to get to where this work is that we have upstairs. So this work, I'm showing one early work, and then I'll kind of jump more to contemporary work. But in 1981, I did a piece called Defunct at the Alberta College of Art and Design Gallery. And what I was interested in at that time was the neighborhoods, it was in Calgary, were being torn down for one of the many oil booms. And so much was lost. The houses were torn down, affordable housing was lost, and the histories and community. And so I went and I created a kind of a replica of a block that was being torn down, and recreated it. The houses were about 12 feet tall, and each had a voice, and they were heard, and they were kind of culled from reactions I got from people in the neighborhoods. What it was like to lose that home, but lose the community and lose the history. So each of the houses had a kind of a rampant kind of opinion on it all. And so the houses were speaking, and during the exhibition, I tore the houses down until at the end there was only one house speaking. So it was kind of like enacting that kind of loss in the community. And what was really important for me in this work in particular was kind of looking at the context of where I was living. And I think as a young artist, it made me realize that I wanted to kind of reflect on what was going on in my social community, and try to use the gallery as a kind of a public forum where conversations could take place through the work through conversations and through people's responses when talking to them. And it seemed to me a really beautiful and important way to kind of engage with these ideas through the work, through the audio, through the experience of walking through it. And I tried to create this idea that I was a developer and I set up this, I was tearing the whole damn thing down and I was going to build an amazing kind of project. And so trying to enact a kind of a proposition of what it would be like to have that happen to a neighborhood and allowing the houses to be cursing and doing all kinds of things. So it was a very influential piece for me. So using audio to really create a context, a kind of a place that was other than the gallery and bringing that into the gallery. And again, the kind of belief that we can use that kind of social space for conversation. And I think I believe in a lot of this work that through that kind of engagement with each other and conversation, there is a kind of a potential for shifts and transformation and social change. So I think that that's kind of embedded, in a lot of the work. So I just thought I'd kind of focus on that piece. And then jumping ahead to 2003, I was interested, I started to get interested in a couple of things that I wanted to talk about to lead us to the piece that's upstairs. One of those things is using performing objects to perform with me. So I was really interested in using sound to kind of create a place within the narrative, a kind of a potential future, kind of a possibility. And so I wanted to use objects to perform with me, and I wanted to create a performance that enacted the space. So I did this at the Owens Art Gallery, performing 5 hours a day for 17 days, doing a kind of a maintenance on a space that was in between a new development in a subdivision and within the edge of the city, which is kind of a part of the forest, but it's also partially torn down. So this kind of strange, I called it outskirts. So what I did is I performed in maintenance of keeping, there's a vehicle down the center, which you can see here. And what I'll do is I'll show the video and I'll let you I'll talk over it while it's going here, while I'm speaking. So what I did is I tried to, there was a road between the subdivision that was being built and the nature that was being torn down. And I was really interested in kind of what nature was learning about survival and protection. And this idea of the species kind of looking at what was happening. Oh, what's happening? And so I had an entrance to it, which had these horses that were the guards, and they were in a kind of a pasture, and they were being interrupted by the viewer coming. And then I had this car that was going up and down the road, and I wanted to implicate myself into this ideas of kind of development and the idea that nature was being destroyed for the houses and the city to expand. So I thought, being in control of a car where I had to drag behind it and steer it so it didn't hit anybody, it didn't crash into the houses, it didn't crash into the forests, and having to drag behind it and steer it. There was something about doing that all day that really got me into a kind of a relationship to what was happening to both sides of the road. And I think too, if there was garbage that the people have been throwing into the woods, and it was kind of trying to get away from the subdivision. There was bags of garbage that were motorized, and my job was to keep them from the forest, take them back to the subdivision. So I kept enacting all these activities with these performing objects to try to create this kind of a relationship to nature and the subdivision that was kind of problematized and also kind of looked at a kind of romanticization, right? And so here we have cigarette butts that are being thrown out of the forest because the forest was terrified that the fire was going to erupt from one of these stupid cigarettes. So what happened was that I would gather them up and put them in the trees, and they would fire them back to the subdivision. It was kind of like attending to the safety of the forest. And so there was all these kind of strange contraptions. And inside the houses, there were these images of a kind of a romanticization of nature with these objects performing kind of images of kind of tension and foreboding, kind of nemesis of what could happen. And so inside each of these little houses, there was like audio tracks and kind of nervous kind of narratives and dreamlike situations where our relationship to nature was really unsteady and strange. So our dinner was marching and singing to us. The soap was calling to us, the teeth. It's just kind of a strange environment. So I really wanted to problematize that relationship by having these narratives that happen. So what was really interesting to me was these objects that were performing with us. I was maintaining the road, and they were all taking care of the various jobs. And that was a really important, exciting moment for me to kind of work together with the objects to create this larger performance. Oops. And then, so this idea of working with other objects and then also now working with other species became a kind of a important focus for the work. So jumping ahead here to 2006, I believe it was, this is a piece called Long Haul, which I was able to do several times, which I was really grateful for. And this is a performance through OCAD, through 7A11D Performance Festival. And what I did is I got a tree that was in a cement planter and I motorized it so I could control it, and we could go for walks through the city and we could look for a place for that tree to be happy, right, to find a home. So we were looking for a place where access to sun and lots of space and some water and some, not too crowded. And so we would drive around the city and try different places, pulling up, and it could go ahead on its own. It didn't need to stay with me, but we walked together anyway. And it could go ahead and then come back. And it was a really wonderful experience walking with the tree and looking for these places. And one thing too is like all the technical assistance I've gotten with this work, I really am so grateful for. And like the last piece you saw with the car, my dear friend Peter Fleming is a great artist who's helped me learn to make that car. And my friend Robin Moody helped me make this beautiful robotic planter. So I have great respect and gratitude for all their help in teaching. It taught me a lot about how to begin working with electronics. And it's been really influential and very exciting for me. So thanks to all of them. And so this tree and I would go around and we were basically, again, looking for pieces of nature strewn around the downtown area. So for example, we would look for leaves that were on the ground, broken sticks, different parts of trees that were fallen on the city and on the ditches and the curbs and everything. And we would gather them up, and I had made little circuit boards which had speakers and little IC chips that had pre-recordings on it. So when I would find like a broken stick, I would tag it like a biologist. I kind of look like a biologist, don't you think, in that picture? Yeah, a little bit. And so I would tag the fragments and plug them into the power that was in the dirt, which was the tree's battery. And then they would broadcast and they would sing and they would talk and tell their stories. And by the time I got back to the gallery, I had a cacophony of crazy leaves and sticks and pine cones, and I even found some horse poo. So I tagged it, and they were all in this kind of chaos and chorus of talking about their experience in the city. So an example would be there was a leaf, really dried up leaf, and it was calling out, I'm really thirsty. Can someone give me a drink? And there was a kind of a call to come and kind of engage with these objects. And it's kind of a narrative of what they had been through in the city. So when we got back to the gallery, in the gallery, there had been all these pieces of the architecture. And so I was thinking about the architecture as the studio and a place where, if one wanted to kind of stop using so much electricity or stop being damaging to the environment, what would you do? Turn out the lights, different things. And there were all kinds of objects that were inside the studio that were talking. There was light bulbs and paper towel dispensers and doors and windows, and they were all greeting the pieces of nature that came in and creating a dialogue between the architectural detail and then the details of the trees. That dialogue would take place while I would embed myself in the wall and recharge without speaking and allow that conversation to take place without interrupting it. So it was kind of a desire to be productive and be engaged, but not to be extracting anything from the environment or being kind of challenging to it or exhausting it. And so it was, and then I would charge up and plug in the tree. And once the battery was full, we'd go back out and do it over and over again. And I'll show you a quick little excerpt of the video. And again, Robin Moody, wonderful artist in Calgary, helped me with the mechanics of that piece and taught me a great deal. And so we would go through the city. Here we are driving through and pick up fragments. And then when I got back to the gallery, I went into the wall and recharged, and then I went back out and did it again. So there's opportunities for me to pick up more and more and more. And by the end, there was this chaos of a chorus of conversation going on in the gallery. So I'll just jump ahead here a little bit. So you can see we're back at the gallery, and everything, the doors are moving, the blinds are moving. Everything's so excited by these pieces of nature coming into the gallery. And there's this amazing conversation. And I just wanted to get out of the way, right? And let them talk. And the paper towel dispenser right at the entrance there was saying, do I really have the courage to live in the dark? So if can I do that? And the light bulb was saying, all I really want is to lie cushioned in the grass. So it was all about this kind of tensions and desires that would happen, when you're imagining this future of letting go of some of these things. So again, yeah. So there, I'll jump ahead, I think. Oops. So I guess we'll have questions at the end, so I'll just march forward here. This is a piece that I did called Alternator, and what I was interested in doing here was I'd moved back to Alberta, and what was really striking to me was that this kind of anxiety and the kind of concern that was going on for the tar sands, and how so many people's families were employed through the tar sands and it was important to their families' livelihood, and people were worried about the kind of effect of it. It's a very, very environmental crisis up there, and it was very upsetting, I think, for everybody, but for many different reasons, because their family was reliant on it. So very, very contentious and very complex. And so what I thought I wanted to do was just kind of start to address some of those things. So what I did is my friend Robin Moody again helped me. We built this kind of car frame that we could turn the steering wheel and it would pump electricity. And I made these little miniature oil derricks that you could take, and if you found an oil spill from a car, let's say, that was leaking on a street or in a parking lot, I could put the oil derricks on that leak. I could suck that oil into my 45-gallon drum that was on the back of my car. And I could save that, so when we run out of oil, I have some oil in it. So what I was interested in was that in order to generate electricity and pump that oil, I had to drive. So it was kind of a cyclical, kind of humorous, strange loop, right? If I stopped driving, steering the wheel, it's turning it, then no pumping, no sucking of oil back into it. So I like to be implicated in it. I wanted the challenge of the effort. It was really interesting because people came up and they helped me. They would sit down with me and we'd do it together, and it was much more manageable. So what happened was we pumped and we pumped and we talked and we talked, and it was really, an important part of it was that engagement with each other and the kind of thoughts that we had about, okay, let's stop pumping, right? Let's just stop driving this car. And then that moment became part of the piece. So again, I was very grateful to Robin for helping me with this piece, but also all the people that came and turned the wheel with me and kind of sat and talked. And it was that conversation was really kind of important to me in the future. So I did it out on the street, and that was in Lethbridge. I did it in Calgary in a parkade, and I did it again in a couple of other locations, just moving the car around the city and looking for spilled oil. And then I was interested in, again, I started to get interested in this idea of collaborating, thinking about learning from other species and learning from each other. And we all have our strengths. And I thought, okay, let's try to work together on a project. So I wanted to create a hospital for cell phones because I was thinking, should I upgrade? What features do I need that I don't have? And so then I was thinking about, well, I could, maybe instead of getting that new extra lens from a camera or whatever, maybe there's something else that would make the phone more valuable. So I thought, well, if a phone was not working right or had the right features I wanted, what if I sent it to a hospital and the hospital was run by a squirrel? And that the squirrel worked on it and tried to give it kind of features and kind of a magic and a meaning and a value to me that was greater than what it would be if I upgraded my phone. I thought that would be really interesting because then I wouldn't need to go get another phone. There'd be something different that I would get from that phone. So the squirrel the squirrel opened the hospital, and we put an ad in the paper, and the squirrel could go and pick up the phone and didn't speak English, but would gesture and get the phone back to the hospital. And for 2 weeks ran the hospital, and there was workshops, and there was they fed the squirrel fed the phones with pine cones and gave them lots of water, and worked with them to kind of calm them and kind of bring out their strengths, and just really spent a lot of time with them. And it was really, really gentle. And people came and dropped their phones off, I think thinking that they got rid of that phone. But then they would come back and visit the phone and have time to sit with the phone. And it was a really interesting experience. And at the end of it, a lot of people came back for their phones and took those phones back home. We only had one death. It was a flip phone where the top actually separated from the bottom. We couldn't save it. But otherwise, we had a lot of interesting kind of events where people coming to the hospital to see their phones. So I was really interested in that kind of collaboration where I was just kind of the facilitator and organizer and the squirrel, and there was a bunch of birds there and some leaves, and they all worked together to kind of help bring these phones back to life. And people took them back, and hopefully they had some kind of different relationship to that technology from then on. So that was our dream. And so then I was thinking too, when I lived in I just moved to Alberta, I was living there then, and I was driving around, I was really struck by the kind of the industrialized agriculture. Like it was very different from where I'd come from. And it was very large scale, and the industry itself was very a bit heartless at times. Like this was just the high end, really large industry, because I think so many people live with animals and treat them well, and they die well, with them. And it's a very different relationship. At these large industries, there's so much quantity that the quality of life of the animal gets forgotten. So I was really struck by that, and I wanted to do this diner, which I call the Lion's Share, which was about a relationship, and I just wanted to create a situation where we remembered the animal that gave its body for us. And so I thought I'd do this kind of diner where in the kitchen there was a robotic chicken named Betsy that would, as soon as you walked in, she would start banging her head against the counter in exhaustion, because you see all the eggs, like she's working so hard and can't keep up. And so she's laughing hysterically. When you get overtired, and she's smashing her head and there's this kind of reality check on what she's going through. And the eggs are on the wall staring at you. And, it's just kind of like, there's a kind of uneasiness to a relationship to that food then. And then when you go out into the diner, there's sticks that are, all the legs of the tables and everything is like spears, and you have to go and poke the eggs. There's kind of a very visceral relationship to the food. And there's a feedlot where all the hot dogs are, and it was only served eggs and hot dogs. And I wanted the hot dogs because I wanted to point specifically to the industry, not people who are, have their own animals and treat them well, that kind of, but the industry where the scrapings off whatever happens, the hot dogs get made. And I wanted to have the hot dogs being kind of really bugged by these pointy sticks that were motorized and poking them nonstop, and the little eggs getting poked all the time. This kind of like, that feeling of tension. And then there was also the people could pick a spear at the door, and they could go to the buffet table, which was like a feedlot, and they could stab their own hot dog. And there was this whole kind of energy of it. And there was, but the one thing that on the tables, there was glasses of milk which had tongues in them. And those tongues, if you took a drink, they would lick your cheek. And there's an intimacy to that was quite for me, an option, kind of where there's a relationship to the body of the animal, and where the milk came from, and just a kind of a visceral experience that was something that reminded me of that. So that was the intention of this piece. So you can see the eggs and hot dogs, and there's the buffet table, and on the buffet table you can see from the image there that it was full of hot dog poo, which was everywhere, right? And they were lying in it, and they were all pressed against the edge, and they were kind of terrified, right? It was pretty terrifying. So, and there's a big spear down the middle where someone had nabbed one, and so it's just that kind of strange place where there was kind of a enactment of a relationship to the body of the animal. And then, of course, I was working at the buffet, and I had to go out and get more hot dogs for the buffet. So I'd have to go out, and before hot dogs were brought into the buffet, they were roaming free on the prairies, right, or the fields, right? You could see them, they're under trees, they're everywhere. So I had to go out and rally them up with a spear and push them, and they did not want to come in. So it was kind of it took forever to get 12 hot dogs back to the buffet. And then when I had to pick them up off the floor and drop them into the feedlot, it was quite a moment where, you really see the difference in their lifestyle between one moment and the next moment. So it was quite for me, an important kind of transformation there. And then I wanted to continue with this work. So I ended up having all these, and everything in these shows is all handmade. So the hot dogs are handmade, the cigarette butts are handmade, everything is made. So it's not the real thing, it's kind of like a replica. But then I had all these poor hot dogs with holes through the middle, right? Some of them were like literally coming in half. And so I thought, well, for heaven's sakes. So I thought I better have a hospital for those hot dogs. So what I did is created, with the help of a lot of great friends, Rachel Chasson and Thrail, who helped me come in the production of some of this work. But I wanted to create a hospital where those hot dogs could be healed. And the idea is that they're basically healing so that they could be reconstituted into cows again and maybe go out into the fields and be out in the fields again as cows. So I created this hospital where there was grass growing up between the floor. And when they were feeling better, they could have a little TV with pictures of the grass and the wind and very, very, very positive, healing kind of environment. And then there was a window. The big cows from the grazing fields came right up and kind of watched them and encouraged them healing and getting back out there and having a kind of a relationship to being out in the prairie, being cows again. So I think that piece again was, the cows helping the hot dogs, and there was kind of a really back and forth relationship, reciprocal relationships between species, and that's kind of, leading me towards the work that we're looking at upstairs. And then, so what I was interested too is thinking then about the kind of consequences of our relationship to, for example, in Alberta, the extraction, the oil fields again, because I was really struck particularly by the risks and the kind of the oil pipelines. Just the kind of, if you go to that kind of future, imagining a future where there's a leak or there's a kind of a shipping disaster or something, the kind of consequences are so severe that I thought, well, what if there was a way that the landscape, these veins through the landscape where the pipelines were moving, the trains carrying oil were moving, the cars full of oil were moving, or like veins through the landscape. What if there was a way that the leaves and the dirt and the animals could lift up those pipelines and protect the land from the leaks and from the disasters? So I created this piece called Veins, where you can see that there's a giant leaf with a kind of a line on it, and that's a snake. And I thought of the pipelines as these snakes that are moving through the land. And they when things are not looking good, there's a crisis unfolding, getting really big and lifting the pipeline up and holding it above the land seemed like something that might help, right? So it's about doing something that might help to protect the land. So the leaves have gathered, and they're working with other animals in these to kind of protect the land. So I created a road down the middle of the gallery and protected the edge of the road with sandbags, and kind of there was pumps again for the pipelines, and there was a train pulling oil down the side, and it was all about this transporting the oil over the land, but the land lifting up and protecting itself. Just that idea of what's the matter there? There we go. Oh, no internet. Oh, wait a minute. What happened? Oh, it's not on the internet. Okay. Well, I was going to show that video of veins, but we can look at it maybe another time. Can you get into it? Okay. Anyway, so what I was interested in that piece was I created these motorized tree trunks that had sticks hitting them. And the idea was that there was kind of a communication between, not in language, but in kind of rhythm between the trees and the landscape and the people walking down the road and coming to view the exhibition and passing through. And so what I was thinking of was that opportunity for kind of communication between the two, and the opportunity to hear those banging tree trunks with sticks as a kind of a rhythm. And I was thinking of the opportunity to, when you're trying to tap out a message, in a crisis where you can't speak. So that was what the motivation was. Okay, thank you. Good work. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I'll just carry on with this, but I'm just going to run through. Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about this over top. So I was able to do this exhibition at Truck, which is an artist-run center in Calgary, and also then an Art Gallery in Montreal, which show very different configurations and physical layouts. But what was interesting for me was this kind of the moving of the snakes. There was something quite unnerving about them. And they're quite big. They're like 8 feet long, and they're kind of moving. The leaf is holding them up. They're like squiggling. If you put a worm in your hand, that kind of feeling of it's trying to get escaping, and you're kind of holding it. And then on the walls, I had this kind of idea of bringing together like plants and animals, and to create these kind of hybrid kind of comments about responding to what was happening in the environment and the landscape. So I brought back the oil wells and had them kind of pumping down these veins through the landscape. And the soundtrack is really trying to create a kind of a tension, allowing the plants and animals and landscape to speak. So there was a kind of an interest in that kind of communication between the people attending the show and the animals and plants that were trying to protect the land and the people that were observing. So yeah, and you can see the sticks hitting the drums and kind of communicating, and the train moving up and down carrying oil. So this kind of movement, and then this kind of interruption to that movement. So for me, it was just a way to kind of envision that gesture to interrupt that movement as a way to kind of compensate or undo or neutralize the risk to the landscape. But again, it was very much about working together with the snakes, the leaves, and kind of a proposition about an interspecies kind of community that's working with these ideas. Okay, so yes, we can carry on. How's our time? Good, yeah. Yeah, I want to get out of the escape. There we go. Sorry. Okay, there we go. And yeah, so I want to jump right from that work into the piece, The Darkness is as Deep as the Darkness Is project, which is kind of it's a narrative that has kind of 3 stages of kind of developing the kind of landscape. So the first time that I did it was at the Richmond Art Gallery, and then when it went to the Walter Phillips, things changed, like the roses appeared, and here the upper above ground kind of part of the piece emerged. So it's kind of like 3 stages in the narrative. So what I was really interested in with this piece was to, again, kind of create this kind of relationship with other species and to try to kind of talk and negotiate and kind of communicate. So I'll just go through it a little bit. The roses were originally part of an earlier piece where they attended a performance that I did at St. Norbert Arts Center, and they came as just kind of a feminist audience that were just laughed through the whole thing and kind of had a kind of a presence. And then I called them back for it to be with this work to kind of have a tone towards the content of this work. So what they're doing, and they're the same upstairs in the Dunlop, is that they're kind of coming to call to us to kind of work together. And so what they're saying mainly is, come closer, we need to talk to you. And they're kind of singing a song, but there's a lot of toxicity in the soil. So their voices are getting very distorted and very kind of strange, and then they're breaking apart. And they're and a lot of them are crying. There's a kind of a sadness to their presence, and they're kind of really trying to reach out and gain that idea of getting very, very large when you're kind of in a moment where you need to speak to someone and you need to be able to communicate kind of seriousness of your concern. So they got really big and they started singing and their voices are falling apart. So that's what their job they're doing in this show, and they're kind of calling to people. So they're the first ones you meet, and they hopefully come in, and there's maybe a dialogue that happens. So between you and the roses when you get upstairs. And then in the first 2 iterations of this piece, there's a burrow. And what I'm interested in with this burrow is that imagining that there's like urban redevelopment, extraction in the land, and there's so many mining going on and so many things going on, that a lot of habitat and disruption to the earth, like digging and pulling in holes and everything. So a lot of the animals and the habitat for plants is getting really destroyed. And so I imagined, this is again a kind of very speculative moment for me. I'm imagining that they've all gathered underground in an old abandoned mine, and they're having a kind of conversation where they're talking about what they can do together, what their strengths are, what they need to do, and they're all trying to describe what it's like to live where they are, which is underground in these kind of little habitats where they're gathering before they move back to the surface. And so they're gathering, and they've got images of all the animals as a kind of a front for us, of all the ones that have like antlers and talons and claws, ones that are kind of guarding, and then the others, there's cranberries talking to a bear on a radio about what's happening in other burrows, and the cranberries are upside down so they can't see, and the bear's explaining what's going on. So it's kind of a dialogue where they're helping each other. They're sending over diggers to help them get up and get unearthed. And they're talking about getting water and air. So there's a kind of a communal kind of discussion about what can happen. And their goal is to dig to the surface and go up to where the extraction machines are and try to get them to stop and to mediate, perhaps maybe reduce the consumption or just talk about what's possible, a kind of a potential of what can happen. And so up in the up top, there's this sword ferns, which are these ferns that, sword ferns that are beautiful. They're very, almost prehistoric. They're these plants that are very, very been around for a long time, and they also are able to absorb toxins and take the toxicity out of them and transform them. So they're very active in remediation. And I started doing this work. I was working on a project with Alana Barteau, an amazing artist in Calgary. Did a project with 6 artists called Remediation Room. And it was about looking at ideas of remediating the land and in contrast to extracting. And so I started thinking about these ideas of remediation and got interested in the sword ferns. And so what's happening in this part of it is that we're just underground. And I imagine that when you walk through this early piece, which was darkness is as deep as the darkness is basically your neck is above ground and you're looking at the sword ferns and you're looking at the sites where the extraction's happening, and your body is underground. And there's ghost ferns, and there's kind of bodies of animals and plants and people and parts of machines, and it's all together in a kind of touching and kind of basically composting and becoming earth that is helping to grow all the plants that are above. So there's this kind of connection between everything that's underground, and then above, the sword ferns are again trying to connect with the machines that are digging and upturning the land. So here there's these towers that come up, and they go down to extract, and they come up with a box. But instead of getting the device, the thing that they're kind of extracting, they get a great big claw or a thorn or something that's a collection of all the histories that are in the earth. And that collection takes the form of a very large, either ceramic or wooden kind of object, which is like a claw, which is kind of like a call to pay attention to kind of the consequences of what's going on with the kind of excess extraction that's going on in some sites. And so in the distance, here I think there's a better picture. In the distance, you can see above the burrow where the animals are, there's all these cranes, and there's kind of urban development going on and digging, and there's also the extraction field that's out where the ferns are. So there's this kind of this world of kind of the fields of extraction, the fields of development that are kind of overtaking the landscape. And it's really for me about a kind of what each member of this kind of community can do to kind of assist or come up with ideas or help each other or that kind of thing. So it's very much a collaborative project. Sorry, I got the beach ball from hell. And so in this work, there's the sword ferns gathering on the machines, growing on top of them, kind of entangling them, but mainly to kind of communicate. So this was a very important part of this work, was this idea of trying to communicate with the machines and to see if there could be some kind of compromise to start with. And so that was something that's really interesting to me, is this idea of communicating. So I started this summer doing a piece that I call Thick Sound. And it's where, with the help of a wonderful artist in Calgary named Alec Brilling, we worked on programming a device that's a little box under, there's a video monitor and a speaker and a translation device. And it's made with a microcontroller. And when you sing into it, to a tree, it gives you sound an image and text back as a kind of a translation. So I'm really interested in kind of creating this kind of umbrella, which is I call the Center for Interspecies Mutual Support in Troubled Times. So it's where we gather, do events where we try to communicate, try to develop translation systems, try to enact activist actions, and work with different species to try to make those things happen. So this was really about going to speak to the trees to find out how they're coping with, the mass shootings, the hurricanes, the drought, the fires, and just try to listen to what's going on. So much of the work is about listening and trying to find a way to communicate. So this was a translation module. We're eventually going to do a performance outside with 10 singers and 10 trees to try to create a kind of full dialogue with the trees. So this was just a prototype experiment by miking the trees and then singing to them and getting different kinds of responses. So again, it's kind of a narrative proposition where there's possible reactions, possible images, video perhaps, different kinds of ways of communicating. And one last piece I'll just talk about really quickly, and then hopefully we'll be open to questions, is the Center for Interspecies Mutual Support is where we've done several group community actions. And this one was called Song for Birds. And there was a group of sparrows, or 5 sparrows, a bunch of aspen leaves, and some people. So the 3 groups got together. And in Alberta, in the tar sands, there's the tailings ponds, which a lot of birds are landing in, and they're getting drowning and getting stuck and not able to fly out. So we decided to create we created these little robots that are clumps of dirt that you can drive with your cell phone. And then there's aspen leaves on top of them. And aspen leaves can float really well, right? And the dirt can kind of float. So the robots went out on the top, the aspen leaves stayed on the surface, and they would locate ducks that were stuck. And we had projections, I think you can see it here. Yeah, so we had projection on the floor of an image of the tailings pond, and we embedded ducks underneath. And when you drove your robot over top, first you had to push all these miniature oil barrels out of the way, and then you saw the ducks. And as soon as you drove over top of them with the aspen leaves, it released the duck, and they flew away. And then afterwards, the sparrows did a media interview, and I translated. And so they talked about this action, and then we also sent postcards to the CEO of the Energy Room, which is promoting the tailings ponds, and we just asked for him to support the ending of the tailings ponds. And so this was a really exciting kind of group effort, and it was really well attended, and it was a really great thing for this organization to do. And so Thick Sound is kind of a continuation of that. So this idea of working together and creating these kind of events is really exciting for me, because it's using the idea of performing with objects and using sound as ways to kind of communicate. And and so upstairs in the Dunlop, was interested with this piece, and the roses are still there calling into the work, and the burrows there as a little kind of shelter in the corner where the cranberry and the bear are having a conversation with all the other animals gathered around. And then in the main room, what I was interested in doing with this piece was to change the sound a bit, have different text, and for this piece, The Fern's Lament, and then also having something above the surface of the ground. In the last piece, as I said, it stopped at about 5 feet. So I raised it up to 6 something. So you're actually walking underground, and you're looking up to where the surface is. And you can see these towers, which are, they're sort of burnt, and they look like a forest where the trees have all burnt down, but it's also like derrick-like structures. So they look like a metal, like an old metal, and as charred wood. So they're kind of a reflection on what had happened up above the earth. And they're everything that's above the ground is this burnt kind of structure, the leftovers from the extraction field. And underneath, you've got the ghost ferns, which are the bodies of the ferns that have died and have fallen down. And you've got the roots of the plants. So now there's the ability to see the whole body of the plant, of the sword fern. So there's a kind of an engagement with the sword fern itself. And there's also the towers moving up and down. So it's kind of for me, it's an interesting shift, because it's really about the kind of presence of the ferns in a more complex way, and the opportunity to communicate directly with them. So So that's the kind of shift that's happening in this piece. And the sound is quite different from the other versions. So it's a kind of my interest in this kind of narrative. I always think of it as an opportunity to kind of to inhabit a kind of a speculative proposition of one possible future. And then when you return from that future, there's the opportunity to steer away from it or invent other versions. And there's a kind of an understanding that happens when one inhabits a kind of a speculative proposition like this. And so that was my interest in doing this. So yeah, I think I should stop now, and hopefully we can have some questions. And again, to just thank everyone so much for coming today, and thank you to the Dunlop for having me here and giving me the opportunity to develop this work, and for everyone that helped. It meant a lot to me to be here and to meet all of you, and thank you for your time. And I hope we have some questions or conversation. So thank you. And thank you to our assignment.
Any questions from the audience?
So your work.
Hi, David.
Hi. Your work's always had empathy, humor, and animism. Does it go back? Is our art's origins in your Mittenism manifesto, or does it even go further than that? And how do you use humor as a strategy? And but your topics are always very serious.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's a kind of the humor is, for me, it's sort of the way I think through things, right? And it's also a way to approach things, like I always find kind of important to laugh at myself. There's a kind of a ability to see more clearly when you're kind of laughing at your own, not seriousness, but concerns. And then you see them more deeply, I think. And also there's, the Mittenism is very important, right? But I think what's core to me is that I think I've always believed, even as a young person, is that if we care about inanimate objects as much as we do other people, there'd be way less suffering, and I think that that's a core thing I really believe in. So caring for mittens or lost tennis balls or something has always been something important to me, because you see the world through different eyes, right? And you care more about different things. So I think, and there's also, it's kind of foolish, right? Most also at the same time. And so I think it's telling that story with the belief that it's true. It creates it's kind of a humorous story, but the seriousness with which it's delivered gives it a kind of a, well, maybe it is true. And there's a kind of a, what's the word for that? A kind of a, could be both things. It could be true and untrue at the same time. And it gives it a kind of a purpose and a seriousness, but it comes through the humor. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Good. Thank you for the question. I'm also from the Maritimes, and there's a really beautiful tradition of telling stories, there too.
Maybe to follow up on David's question. So I was wondering throughout your talk, if it is to you a speculative proposition, if it is a type of humor, or if you actually do see inanimate objects as being animate. And I'm wondering, like my partner actually just discovered that he's on the autism spectrum, and apparently his whole life he has believed that objects talk to him. And apparently this is actually a common phenomenon for people on the ASD. I was really interested. I wish you'd been here with me today in hearing about this from you, and wondering if it's something you sincerely experience, or if you're using this in your work, not in a malicious way, but using it to express something, these more serious topics with humor.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's a choice that I've made to kind of look at the world this way, right? And I think that I'm using it as a way to deepen my sense of empathy, I think, right? So, I mean, I don't know the experience that you're talking about your partner. I don't really know that from my own experience, but for me, it's like I believe that it's important to be kind to everything. I don't believe that thing is particularly speaking to me, but but I believe that my ethics are that I must be kind to it. Okay. So it's a little bit different, but I thank you for that question. Does that answer it?
Yeah,
Okay,
very well.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was so wonderful, Rita.
Thank you, Krista.
So I know that Derek shows up in multiple works.
Yes, Darren.
Derek. Does Darren carry memories from those projects forward into other projects?
Yes, definitely. And that's a really good question. For those of you who don't know, Darren is the squirrel that ran the hospital. Right? And when I did the performance, I did the exhibition of Darkness is as Deep as the Darkness is in the Walter Phillips Gallery in Banff, the Bemis Centre. At the opening of that show, just in the project of the sword ferns guarding the landscape and helping with talking to machines, a lot were killed, like an amazing amount. So Darren came and had his experience with the hospital. He set up a hospice in the bunker where he helped the ferns pass into being ghost ferns. So he stayed through the whole performance and the opening and the show of just tending those ghost ferns that were dying. He set up little beds for them, and it was really beautiful. So he had the whole memory of that early show and then running the hospital, and same with the roses, they had carried that, that past experience forward into this new work. That's why they're speaking the way they are, is because something has shifted and they see that and they're not afraid to say what needs to be said. Right? Great question, thank you.
Any other questions from the audience or online? I think maybe now we can move to more. Oh, one second. We do have one question. Communication, inanimate objects speaking, finding voice. But is your voice yet with your deep listening? We get to, at very least, acknowledge that our place continued is not at the epicenter of the universe, the very start of communication. I think this is a comment, not a question. But a good comment.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, I think I encourage everyone to move to more of an informal conversation upstairs within the gallery space. Thank you very much, Rita, and everyone that's attended.